building a better Bay Area for a safe and secure future. This is ABC 7 News.
I do not think that going back to school is a safe option.
Just don't want to risk getting my friends, teachers, or family sick.
I prefer we continue distance learning.
I do not want to go back to school in the fall.
I like to go back to school this fall.
I'd love to go back this year.
I'm missing out on a normal high school experience.
Hope the school year will be as close to normal as possible.
8 different students, 8 different expectations for fall. ABC 7 is committed to building a better Bay Area. And this week we are focusing on education and what back to school will look like for parents and students this fall. Hello, I'm Leanne Melendez. We're going to spend the next half hour talking with experts about middle and high school students, keeping them motivated for distance learning. Now, zooming in today, we have Lee Fertig, head of school at the Nueva School, Louis Friedberg, executive director with EdSource, Dr. Hilary Goldshore, a clinical psychologist, and Beth Meyerhoff, California PTA Education Commission. Thank you to all of you. Now, I just ran across an opinion poll conducted by Reuters that found that only 1 in 4 Americans thought that it was safe to reopen schools. The survey was conducted sometime in mid-July. Here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have decided, of course, districts have decided to start the fall with distance learning. But there is one private high school in San Mateo County, the Nueva School, which in July did a little experiment, and they did a little practice run to see how students would deal with hybrid learning. Lee, we want to talk to you first, of course, as head of the school. We're curious. We're dying to know how it went. And let me just add that you had 2 groups. So take it from here. And we have pictures, by the way.
Great. No, it's really quite interesting, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Most schools in the county are going to start in a remote distance fashion predominantly, obviously due to the situation. But I think everything that we hear about this virus, the severity and the impact, indicates that there are going to be ebbs and flows for several months, potentially, if not more. And that schools in particular, the implications for schools and even universities is that we might need to be fluid in our thinking. And so even though we might predominantly be beginning the school year off campus rather than on campus, we know that we're going to have to start on campus at some point and pivot toward that. We did a pilot program in the high school. We did a pilot program in the middle school. We asked for volunteers. We asked for their permission, their parents' permission, and we brought them in on a small scale, and we attempted to achieve simultaneous learning. Simultaneous learning is when you have some kids in the classroom, some kids at home, potentially some kids even on campus in a different location, and a teacher, the adults in the room, trying to juggle all these different locations, all these different modes of learning. It's involved. It involved a lot of preparation. It involved quite a bit of technological resource, some teacher training, but it worked. It was challenging, but it worked. And it was inspiring and exciting to see that we actually could achieve this if we needed to.
And Lee, I understand that some thought it was worth it. They liked the interaction with the teachers and other students. Others, not so much. They didn't like all the cleaning up. They didn't like the distancing. Tell me about that.
I think there was some discomfort, maybe not discomfort, that's too strong a word, but some of those things felt a little bit artificial compared to the usual schooling experience. But actually talking to everybody, hearing from them, their feedback, their parents, it seemed fairly unanimous that actually they got used to it pretty quickly. All the protocols, the lining up, the circulation mechanisms, the hand washing, the sanitizing, the face coverings, and they quickly got to the business of learning. And what we heard was people were so positive to actually have this opportunity to be back on campus, to actually have in-person collaboration, to engage in educational discourse, and people loved it. I think most of them, if not almost all of them, really felt good about, if we have the chance to do this, we're going to try to pull it off as best we can.
That's right, but let's make it clear that in the fall you will start online. Now, Hillary, many kids who did online learning in the spring were psychologically affected. Some even told me they felt lonely. So as a parent, what can I do to make it better for my child?
Yeah, I think just asking the question is so important. We have to be mindful and aware that this is going to have a psychological impact on our kids. And so having dialogue around it regularly about what to expect, about how they're feeling as the process goes along, and bringing in resources when necessary. So to kind of back that up before distance learning starts again in the school year, sitting down with your kids and saying, this is what the paradigm is going to look like. Here are the good things, and here are the things that might be difficult. It might feel lonely. It might feel sad. It might feel difficult. And let's keep an open dialogue so we can process those feelings. And let's bring in resources, whether that means, a friend via the phone or Zoom, or whether that means a professional resource like a therapist if depression, anxiety, and feelings of isolation escalate. So the key is to talk about it, to have a fluid, ongoing, consistent conversation.
But you know that some students don't like to talk about it. So what can they do to improve things, to feel more comfortable with the online process, let's say in the bedroom, at home?
Yeah, right. I think, yes, I think that's a good point. And I just want to add to this that especially with kids in the age range we're talking about now, that a lot of kids will say, I'm fine, I don't want to talk about it kind of thing. So putting out ideas, you may have feelings, this might be difficult, and not getting them to necessarily agree with what you're saying is important. We want to provide them a narrative that they can borrow from or have in their back pocket if they need it, if those feelings come up. And in terms of the distance learning itself, it's tough. But I think to the extent that you can personalize the space you're going to be in, it's really important to create a comfortable space, to have, pillows and things that are inspiring or feel connected to friends or good experiences, et cetera, is really important. Taking a very deliberate approach to setting up your learning space to make it feel inviting, positive, et cetera, is really important.
Yeah, with that said, I've heard some people say that they tell their child, you have to wake up at the regular school time, meaning if they are in school from 8:30 to 2:30, then you wake up early and complete all the work, the assignments by that time. So don't let them sleep by, till 11:30 in the morning.
I think unfortunately, I think scheduling is still really important, that to maintain a routine will keep the kids feeling kind of contained and grounded. And even though they'll protest, just like they do during regular school, of getting up early and such, and look at this as an opportunity to kind of bend the rules, I wouldn't do it. I would keep them to a schedule, because studies show that kids do better when their environment is predictable and when boundaries are set. And so even if they don't like it, I would still keep a schedule, much like what it looked like when they were in school.
Okay, good advice. And we want you to join in the conversation. So go to Facebook or YouTube to weigh in and interact in today's virtual town hall. We're taking a break on air, but the conversation continues on our live stream. Stand by. So Louis from EdSource, I want to say you are, for me as an education reporter, the Bible, because I get so much great information from you with regard to, education and COVID. One thing that you told me before is that parents have to stay connected with their teachers, and that is very important, especially now. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Hi, and Leanne, good to see you again.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things, what's going to be happening in this fall has never been attempted before. I mean, on this scale, unless your kid has been in a virtual school, and there are charter schools where it's all online, but to have the whole curriculum online for millions of kids, that has never been done before. And teachers aren't really prepared for that, most of them. And one of the things we've looked at is that actually teachers did not get that much preparation. We would have hoped that they would have really spent the summer boning up on online techniques, but that didn't happen in a really formal way. Teachers could do it on their own. But I think one of the important things to do is to really look at, we're going to need different strategies for different age groups. I mean, the younger kids, and I think there's general agreement that the youngest kids, kindergarten, first, second graders, those are going to be the most difficult kids to reach, because attention span, parents are going to have to be there. But at the other end, parents don't have to be there when kids are online in middle school, and particularly, and certainly in high school. And so how do we know what's going on with those kids? They're going to be behind closed doors, as we already mentioned. Kids are going to say, oh, I'm fine, everything's fine. But so the communication, I think, with the parents is going to be even more important.
So be the squeaky wheel. Online, do we email teachers? What do? We call them?
Well, teachers are supposed to really keep in touch with the parents. I think that's an expectation. But certainly, I think if parents have any questions, they should be, I mean, and every teacher
Louis,
gives
let's
out the
pause for just a second. We're going back, and we'll talk to you in just less than 2 seconds.
I'm hoping that this school year will be a lot less stressful and teachers will be a bit more understanding about students' experiences with online learning and their family situations while at home.
I feel as though social distance learning is actually a positive experience that we can all benefit from.
I also think that going to school in person is much more beneficial than doing distance learning.
I would really like to go back to the classroom because I could meet my new teachers and do hands-on activities.
And welcome back. There are some great resources out there for parents. And as I was pointing out before, edsource.org is a great one for parents. For me, I follow education in COVID on a regular basis. Louis, thanks again for being here with us. You told me that there are many, many, many resources for parents. In fact, sometimes too many. Do you have any in particular besides, of course, EdSource?
Well, I think Great Schools, for example, is probably the best gateway. Greatschools.org right here in Oakland. As you mentioned, so many different resources, and it really depends on the age group. But really, this is not an issue for parents. This is really an issue for the kids in terms of the resources. I think, as we were saying earlier, when we talked earlier, Leanne, that it really is going to be super important for parents to be in close touch with the teachers. Without interfering, got to give your kids some space to kind of get used to this. But I think you don't want to be surprised at the end of the semester, because one of the things, particularly for high school students, last spring when there was the online learning, didn't go so well, but the stakes were relatively low, because high school, the seniors already got the college admissions, their applications in, and there were no real grades. There were pass, not pass, or credit, no credit. But now schools are going to have to grade the kids. Mm-hmm. And so particularly at the high school level, the stakes are higher this time around than they were in the spring.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I do want to ask Beth from the California PTA. These are things you don't think about. Certainly I don't, but one important thing that you were suggesting is that parents, what they can do right now is to make sure that you have good connectivity, that you have all the ducks in order to go online and be prepared in the fall.
Absolutely. For distance learning to be successful, all students are going to have access to the internet and a computer or a tablet. And certainly there's going to need to be flexibility in timing that works for families with multiple children and adults working from home. So we think input is going to be really important to obtain from local families, and we're calling for clear and frequent communication. PTA has always served as a vital connection between schools, families, and the community. And we know that families are looking for the latest information, and we want to provide the latest information and serve as a resource. And we're also concerned in making sure that the health of students and staff, both physical and mental, is addressed while still considering guidance from health experts.
Yeah, and speaking of, Lee, let's talk about the teachers. What can schools do to keep teachers from feeling too stressed out? Because, now they are doing everything online. They're not familiar with it. So what are you doing to keep everybody sort of calm?
I think it's a really good question, and it goes back to what Louis was talking about before. It's uncharted territory, and we can't forget about, it's about the kids, but we can't forget about these essential workers, the teachers. They're the unsung heroes throughout all of this. And I think what schools can do is is just provide an extra level of support to stay open with communication, be honest and transparent with the types of decisions that are being made and why. Are there little things that schools can do to take some certain little responsibilities off of their plate, or maybe mitigate those responsibilities a tiny bit, provide a little extra buffer time in between classes, things of that nature. I think every school has its own context. Every school has its own set of resources. And I think that it's important to just make sure that we steward these teachers through this uncharted water as well.
I want to ask Beth quickly. In the spring, we saw many schools adopt a grading policy of credit or no credit. That was very controversial, especially among parents, students. A lot of them didn't like it. Are we going to see this again? Is this going to happen once again?
That I do not know. I saw a lot of different districts do a lot of different things, and I think part of the anxiety for students was not being able to know what to expect. So if there are changes to grading policy, if it can be provided to the students early on, and teachers know the expectations, then everybody understands what's going to happen in the fall.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a break. What could school look like in the fall at any grade level? Well, go to abc7news.com for an interactive look and to get some of your back-to-school questions answered. Again, we'll be right back. And Lee, let me ask you this, because I know that at the Nueva School, you did not have the credit or no credit policy. Very unpopular among students and parents. They just didn't want it. They wanted the actual, grade A, B, C, D.
Yes, in full transparency, I wasn't here back in the spring because I'm new here at Nueva School, but I was staying abreast of what was going on in that situation. And I think the community was solicited for their opinion, the kids, the parents, and teachers. And what I do understand is there was an informed decision made that, based on our context and where these kids, what their interests are, where they want to head in terms of post-secondary plans and colleges and universities, for a variety of reasons, that it was important to stay with those grades. You also have to understand that in the 9th grade, the first year of our high school, we don't give grades. So that would mean that many students would have no grades in 9th grade, no grades in 10th grade, and that's half their high school career already. So we want to balance that out before the end of the 4 years.
Okay. So Louis, you recently, actually wanted to ask you this, you recently attended a webinar with about 1,000 or so teachers. I'm curious, what are some of the questions that they have been asking?
Well, I have to say, Leanne, I was a little taken aback. And again, this reflects the fact that there's been relatively few resources for teachers to get up to speed. And it's still going on every afternoon at 3 o'clock, when there's 1 hour that the California Teachers Association is offering teachers, and at different levels. The first one was for elementary, middle, and then, so they're going through the stages. But I tuned into the first one, and I was really surprised the questions were like really basic. Like, where do I set up my... Well, they did. There are quite a few of them. Out of the 1,000, so we didn't hear, but several. Where do I set up my room? And the kind of questions you're asking. What kind of resources do I? What? And the instructor, who was a teacher from a virtual charter school, was saying,
I'm
"Well,
going to
there's
pause right there in just a minute, and we'll see you in just a minute."
I don't feel very motivated when I do distance learning. I prefer to be in-person classes.
I'm not looking forward to return to virtual learning, simply because teachers, even the best teachers, can't give their kids the same benefit.
I'm not feeling great about distance learning just because it's so hard to stay motivated and stay focused.
I'll miss out on all the activities that seniors get to participate in, and I hope that I'll definitely get to do those once-in-a-lifetime things.
And we're back. Lee, I just wanted to ask you this. What's in store for seniors and juniors? As remember, they have the ACT, they have the SAT. Parents and their kids were very concerned last year.
Yeah, that's a changing landscape as well. Fortunately, increasingly, more and more colleges and universities are becoming test optional, so that helps a bit. It alleviates the situation a bit, but it is an issue. We are still going to be our kids are still going to be taking the SATs and the ACTs. We're just working with the College Board and the other organizations that offer these to try to get as much opportunity to do these tests as possible. It's difficult, but the universities actually, in my opinion, have actually been fairly good about understanding the circumstances.
Now, Louis, let's talk a little bit about learning pods, where parents form these small groups and they hire tutors. Again, another controversial issue. You're hearing that from both sides. Louis?
Oh. Yes, absolutely. The learning pods, this is where parents organize their own groups of students.
What are you hearing from both sides, Louis?
Well, some people really think this is the way to go, but on the other hand, it means that families that don't have the resources won't be able to set up these learning pods. Right. And so that's going to contribute to this, to these divides and potentially contribute to greater achievement gaps. And really what we're trying to do is close those achievement gaps. So, so some school districts like San Francisco are forming their own kinds of pods, and other districts are also looking at that, where they can bring smaller groups of students potentially to school. But I mean, we have to see whether that's possible in terms of the social distancing issues and the guidelines. So some school districts are talking about arranging for kids to meet in community centers, libraries, and so on. So, but really that's the goal, is to see, can we get help to smaller groups of students?
That's right. And Hillary, at what point do we say, you know, enough is enough? These kids have to be together psychologically. It's better for them. At what point do we go back to hybrid learning?
Yeah, I mean, that's the million-dollar question. I mean, it's so difficult to weigh the health concerns and all the risks involved there with the psychological factors that we can no longer say are temporary or part-time. It does matter that these kids are not together and are not having an interactive, sort of energy-filled experience. And as time carries on, that matters more and more, the impact. So I would love to see more and more thought into what Louis was just talking about, figuring out if there are opportunities for even small group pods, so to speak, to be in learning environments together. So there's still an opportunity for social, emotional experiences and to, you know, mobilize the energy that comes from being together. It's difficult to recreate that at home alone in your room.
So say we are giving schools the green light to reopen safely and start. How do you reassure? Okay, how do you reassure parents, teachers, and students that it's safe? I'm going to just throw that out there to the group.
It's going to be really tough. Some parents are going to really eager to get the kids back to school. I mean, everybody wants the kids back in school. That we take that as a given. But people are going to have different sensitivities, different levels, different fears, and also practicalities. Can they afford to keep kids at home? Do they have the resources to keep kids at home? So I think it's, you know, before this latest restrictions on schools, a lot of districts did surveys of their parents, and they found about a third of parents, varied by district, didn't want their kids to go back to school. So, and so much will depend on where the pandemic is at that point. I mean, right now, it's very scary. Pandemic is expanding, and with some good news the last week or so in California. So hopefully that will continue. But we don't know where things will be in November, December, when decisions would have to be made for the next year.
I hear a lot of parents and teachers say, as long as they have a lot of PPE, I'll be okay with that. So we're going to take a break on air, but the conversation continues on our live streams, including Facebook Live right now.
I hope this school year we will get to go back to the classrooms, but in reality, we would most likely be doing online learning.
I hope the school year will be as normal as it could possibly be, including involvement with extracurricular activities as well as the online learning environment. I hope that we can return to some sense of normalcy.
I hope we're able to go back into class and learn physically, but I highly doubt that.
I miss the environment, but I prefer to be at home where I'm safe.
And we continue the conversation here. Lee, I wanted to ask you, distance learning, you can handle it, it seems, in the classroom, but what happens when you leave the classroom? Kids, high schoolers, they want to hang out. And, I don't want to be crude here. I'm going to be practical. They are raging hormones. Do you tell them no? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I think schools need to develop a new set of guidelines, a new set of protocols. It's the new normal. Schools need to leverage as much outdoor space as they can, because all the research is showing there's a big distinction between indoors and outdoors. I think there's circulation mechanisms, there's distancing, there's friendly ways of reminding each other to hold each other accountable for staying 6 feet apart. You can make games out of it. Even for the older kids, there's creative ways of having the kids buy into that protocol making themselves. And schools are going to need to do that.
And so to all those students, how do you, Hillary, how do you send gentle reminders and not be, as my kids say, nag, 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 nag? How do you remind them of that?
Yeah, I think you have to work top down. We're in an unprecedented situation, and to remind them that normally we wouldn't want to put these boundaries on them, but in these special circumstances, here are these new rules under this new paradigm so that we can be together. And that's part of the sort of sacrifice for finding ways to reconnect. And I think empathizing with how difficult it is, that it is difficult to not be able to go close to your friends, to hug your buddy or your boyfriend, et cetera, and to just be a sounding board for that frustration and that, that difficulty in terms of not being able to grow up in a more spontaneous way at this point in time.
I think a lot of students will say, I do care about my parents. I do care about my grandparents. So I'm going to do the right thing.
That's right. I think part of them is reminding them that they're part of this, risk cycle.
That's right. I'm going to leave you at that. Thank you so much. I'll be right back. And we want to thank our panel of experts for taking the time out of their busy schedules today to talk with us and with you about distance learning for middle school and high school students. You can learn more about the back-to-school developments on abc7news.com and on ABC7 News app. All week long, we'll be talking to experts in education, leaders in child development, families, and teachers. And each day, don't miss a Bay Area conversation about different education-related topics. Tomorrow, we'll take a closer look at colleges and Friday teachers. And to all middle and high school students, in the word of Steve Martin, be so good they can't ignore you. Now with that, I say ABC7 News at 5 is next.